Geoff, I want to thank you for joining us today. And first, start with the cuts that we've seen throughout our government. What stands out to you the most and why?
Well, again, look, if you're my age, you've seen these things before, okay? Nobody's reinventing the wheel. Doge is kind of, it had a precursor in the Reagan administration with the Grace Commission, had a precursor in the Clinton administration with a committee that he turned over to Vice President Gore. It had a precursor in the George W. Bush administration. So this is not new. What is new is kind of the authority and the ability that Doge has to almost single-handedly shut down agencies, agencies that have been around for a long time. And that's where I think the danger comes in. Look, I think any review of government would be good. I've served in government twice. I can tell you, there's probably there's probably waste and mismanagement there as well as all over. I don't believe there's much fraud, but that's the selling point that the administration likes to use. Oh, there's fraud. There's not. There's waste and mismanagement. But if you're going to do something like this, I think you've got to, as I said, do it from a top to bottom, 360-degree view rather than just picking and choosing agencies and industries that you just don't like.
And you served in the Bush administration as the U.S. was facing an economic recession. Recently, President Trump has refused to rule out recession in the near future. As someone who has experience, from your perspective, does it seem we are recession bound, and how could that play out?
Well, I would preface it by saying I'm not an economist, okay? But I was on the Federal Housing Finance Board in 2008 when we went through kind of our last big recession. That was triggered mainly by the housing industry. And at that point, credit markets froze up. The reality was nobody could get credit after credit flowed fairly freely for the years before. So I guess if I were going to draw any comparisons, I would say, the danger is we are now globally intertwined in most of our economics. And that's what we really found out in 2008. It's only gotten more globally intertwined. The difference, I think, is in 2008, you could make a case it was a global systemic crisis that impacted everybody. The difference, I think, in the one we may be heading toward now is going to be one where it mainly impacts the United States. And that's a big difference. And it's frankly much more dangerous for US citizens because, you can't in 2008, you could kind of say, look, this is happening to everybody, so we can work to fix it. When it's just the US driving it makes it a little more difficult to get out of it.
And we just got news today on the upcoming X date and the debt deficit about to default. What could this mean for our economy as we watch Doge continue to cut portions of the federal government?
Well, the argument obviously being made is, cutting this money is going to help us toward the deficit. The reality is that, frankly, the cuts that I think that they're making are not, in my opinion, as dramatic as they think they are. And this has been borne out over the last month or so when Doge would post numbers and even, kind of what I would consider non-biased reporters, not reporters for liberal news organizations, but just standard financial services reporters would be able to find out, look, you counted that 3 times, or this doesn't matter. So again, I think as we continue down this road of piling on deficits, the danger is just going to be trying to get it in control. And the flip side of that is if the administration continues to push for tax cuts and things of that it's frankly that simple economics, okay? If you've got a budget shortfall, you can do 2 things. You can either increase revenue or you can cut expenses. You can't just cut expenses. In other words, it's just not going to continue to work. And the danger is, for those of us that are like me, my age, we're leaving it to people like you, your age, and we seem to just be kicking the can down the road. And at some point, someone's going to have to make some tough decisions and decide what they're going to do. Ideally, those tough decisions are made across a fairly level playing field.
And pivoting to your current role with the ACUARP, how has this administration impacted your work as we have seen a fluctuating stock market and sporadic tariffs?
Well, the ECRP is a trade group that deals with internal auditors and risk and compliance folks. But as I look at this from a broad perspective, um, you know, anytime that anytime that you change up a system, you're going to have you're going to have some upheaval and there's going to be some uncomfortable feelings. What is issue right now, I think, is that these things are being made in a draconian manner, and they are, sometimes cuts to the bone. As I said, sometimes things, agencies that have been there for years disappearing, and it's all being done without any real congressional oversight and overview. And that's where I think the danger comes in. So, looking at something like the deficit, if Congress doesn't get involved, it becomes basically just an administration push an issue. And that's always dangerous. I mean, we've had three branches of government and we've depended on them for decades, centuries. And right now, what's really happening is you kind of have the executive branch dictating to the legislative branch. And it's basically all going to now come down to the judicial branch and how they interpret and feel that the administration can do things.
Geoff, thank you so much for joining us today.
Devin, thank you. I appreciate the invite.